However, I think now we've got a really cool SEC contest going on, and we expect the SEC to field a champion that's going to be one of the two best teams in all of college football. We expect the Big Ten champion and the SEC champion to play in the national championship game. That's not shade. That's just the way that it is. However, the more I look at Oregon, the more I got to ask the question that I'm asking of A&M. Is that team good enough to beat Georgia? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like Georgia's going to be inevitable as the number 2 team in the country. And given that the defense seems to be rounding back into the kind of form that we expected to see from day one. Say nothing of what they did against Alabama, right? You go down 28-0 to Alabama, but then you're able to claw yourself back into a lead, and you narrowly lose this game on the road at Bryant-Denny. Okay. Add to that, Oregon beats Ohio State 32-31, and frankly has beaten the next 2 Big Ten opponents they played by a zillion, 73-9 actually. It's 35-0 to Purdue, and then earlier today, they beat up in Illinois 38-9. Dylan Gabriel's been dealing, right? He's thrown for an average of 290 yards in both of those games. Tez Johnson dealing. Terrence Ferguson didn't even play again. Jordan Burch is out again. Like, they're still becoming the program that could be the kind that could look back at that 2021 team and go, remember when we got stomped out by Georgia? Remember when we lost that game by 42 points? Well, no, 46 points? What if we can get all that back? What if we can go back to that place and we can try to challenge them one more time? I'm sure Dan Lanning would like nothing more. So, not all those guys are there. A lot of those guys are gone. But that was a formative moment for them. That was do you have enough to stay here? However, getting to see Ohio State go down to Nebraska in the fourth quarter and need to come back and win at the shoe doesn't make me feel that much better about what Oregon was doing against Ohio State at Autzen. Because what you wanted from Ohio State in that game, if you're Oregon, is to stomp out Nebraska the way that Indiana stomped out Nebraska. Instead, we have to talk about Nebraska being decent, or we have to talk about Indiana being really, really good. I don't know that we were prepared for that. I don't even think Indiana was prepared for that. Because as I'm thinking about this, the question that I had written down is Indiana the second best team in the Big Ten? I think the answer to that is yes, right? I think if you lined up Indiana with Penn State, Indiana's going to win that football game. That's what I think. Drew Aller being healthy or not, I think Indiana's going to win that football game. What I saw from them with a backup quarterback in Taven Jackson against Washington was more about them being able to run the football and do what they want, but also a defense that was not cowed by any offense they've seen so far. They seem to be legitimately good offensively, defensively. They get Curtis Rourke back, who's probably going to be dealing. They can contend with anybody, which means that the game that Ohio State's going to play with them could be like the A&M Texas one, where you're playing for an opportunity to get into the Big Ten championship against Oregon. And also, Ohio State fans would tell me I'm remiss not to mention this, and Oregon fans for that matter too. Since losing Josh Simmons in the Oregon game, that Ohio State offensive line ain't been right, and it's getting worse. Okay? You lose Mikulski, who's the backup left tackle, and you got to slide Donovan Jackson to left tackle, which means that you got 2 guards on one side of Seth McLaughlin and 1 guard who don't play left tackle. All-American guard, Donovan Jackson, but he don't play left tackle. There's a reason why he plays guard. You know what I'm saying? If you have that sort of a hole that you can't fill with somebody that is as good as Josh Simmons, people are going to line up on that side of the ball and try to go after you. And I don't know that the offensive line that Ohio State has right now is going to be able to hold up to that kind of pressure when you go face the class football teams in the sport. And Penn State is on the fringe of one of the class football teams in the sport. So you're going to get a great challenge and a great test in Happy Valley next Saturday against the Penn State team that can run the football and against the Penn State defense that is better than the offense that they field. They're going to T-Fy on you. And if you can hold up against that defense, I think, okay, cool. You're going to be able to do something against Indiana. You're going to be able to do something against Oregon if you get back to the Big Ten championship game. Say nothing of what Michigan may or may not be by the time they get to them, because they got to win against their little brother earlier tonight as well. So is Ohio State in trouble? Yeah, Ohio State's in trouble. Ohio State's in trouble not just because it feels like people are losing faith in what Ryan Day is capable of doing in a very real way. Like, there was one comment I read in the segment that we did about Ohio State's win against Nebraska today. It was like, his middle name is Cooper, as in John Cooper. John Cooper is a bad word at Ohio State. And I got a hard time with that because John Cooper coached at TU before he coached at Ohio State. But the point is taken. He would win 9 games, but he wouldn't win the games that mattered to them, so he got fired. You know what I'm saying? Ryan Day is 62-9. He has never not won a game that came down to somebody's ranking being 12 or higher, right? If you're not ranked in the top 12, you just weren't going to beat Ohio State. But Ohio State fans will tell you, yes, that would matter. That if Joe Blow was the head coach at Ohio State, you're not supposed to lose to unranked opponents. You're certainly not supposed to lose to opponents outside the top 10. It's not supposed to happen. And he has a hard time winning those football games. Think about the game that they played against Missouri. Depleted as Ohio State was, they still lost that game, right? Think about the game they just played against Oregon. Depleted, but they lost that game. Now they got another ranked matchup against Penn State. And if JT Tuimoloau doesn't show up a couple years ago, you just take that game over, Penn State wins that game too. Okay? Then take it back to what Michigan has done the last 3 years. And you can see their frustration. Their frustration is getting into these games like this one that A&M was playing against LSU, and they can't win it. That's really going to upset them as Indiana is in the middle of its magic season. I was doing my due diligence, and I uncovered this stat, and I don't want to say I uncovered the stat. I remembered to look for this stat. I'm sure somebody else has looked for it before. I don't want to take credit for that. I do want to say we've been talking about, Indiana being 8-0 for the first time since 1967, right? Turns out they won 9 games at Indiana just twice, 1967 and 1945. Indiana has never won 10 games in a season. At 8-0, with 4 games left, they can get to 10 wins for the first time ever, and they got 4 games to do it with. On top of that, we're talking about a program that has not really played for a national championship or in a New Year's Six Bowl, at least in the last 40 years, right? So in that way, Indiana is the more surprising team than Vanderbilt, than BYU, than Iowa State, than Miami. Indiana might damn well be a top 10 team in the AP rankings tomorrow, given that LSU is going to get knocked out. And you might think that Indiana is a better football team than Tennessee. You might think that. I don't know that I would hold a grudge against that. But that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about that is where Curt Cignetti's program has gone in a very short amount of time. Also, one of the things that I love most about what this sport has provided us is you could be really great one year, and you could be really terrible the next, or you could be really terrible last year, and be really great the next, right?